Welcome to Blade HQ, everybody. Today's a very special day because we're going to talk about one of our favorite knife brands, Microtech. And they turned 30 years old this year, and we're going to talk about how they came to be, some of the big names in the game, and some of the most amazing knives they offer so that we can help you find the best Microtech knife for your lifestyle. Let's talk knives. Microtech was started by Tony Marfione in Vero Beach, Florida in 1994. In his apartment, he set up a CNC machine because he was a machinist by trade, and he made the UDT, which stands for Underwater Demolition Team. For you military history experts out there, my understanding is the UDT is what sort of predated the SEALs, but that is just my understanding. They were around in World War II, and they were underwater doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And that UDT was based on them, and it was given that name after a while, but originally it was just called the Micro Knife. And it took the knife world by storm. It had a very nice milled aluminum handle, a grippy traction inlay, an ATS-34 blade that just launched open at the touch of the button. It was really, really good, especially for its time, and it got Tony Marfione on the map. Less than 4 years later, in 1998, he got his first awards at Blade Show. I believe he was 28 years old when that happened. If you're older than 28, you should know exactly how not put together you feel at 28. And the fact that Tony Marfione was not only making knives, but making award-winning knives at a production scale in 1998 was incredible. And ever since then, he has been on the forefront of knife innovation. And that continues all the way up to today. I don't even know what crazy stuff he's working on in his shop in North Carolina now, but I had the honor and privilege of visiting him at his factory and home in North Carolina in January. And he showed me some stuff he's working on I can't even talk about, but I will tell you, he has a brain that is thinking 3 steps ahead of the entire knife industry. And perhaps the biggest evidence of that was the ULTR We've seen a lot about the front mechanisms on the market today, but the ULTR is the one that really put them on the market because it's a really nice size, it's a nice action, double action. If it comes off track, it's not too hard to just get it back on track, just pull it back out. This is really good, and it came out in the late 90s. And since then, this thing has been emulated, copied, and competed with to no end. Now, in that time, it's definitely seen some upgrades. It had a few textural differences. This is a special edition that's called the Bounty Hunter. It's kind of got the fun Star Wars-y stickers on the back. This is a lot of fun, and this knife is over 30, almost 30 years old, and it is so good, especially for how old it is and how little innovation it's taken to keep it at the very top of its game. It's also had some miniature versions. This one's the UTX-85, 85% the size of the ULTR. And there's also an even smaller one called the UTX-70. These are really great knives, and they've stood the test of time. Now, in that time, other people have been innovating. There's a ton of brands out there making OTFs, and Microtech has noticed, and they have stayed on top of it. So now we have the Gen 3 stuff coming out. So there is an ULTR Gen 3 that was announced at Blade Show, but here we have one that's actually out. This is the Combat Trodon, another Microtech classic. This is the big one. If I'm going to a war zone, sign me up for this guy. And this one not only is big and beefy, but with this new system, which is running a different rail in here, which is called the dual fuel action, it makes it an effortlessly smooth action here. And there's also these little grooves in here called crud cutters. And what crud cutters do is they make sure that gunk and lint from your pocket or dirt from the battlefield or whatever don't make it so your action doesn't run. So it's going to be nice and easy to run no matter how dirty the knife will get. Got a nice glass breaker on the back, and this one uses Microtech's special M390 MK blade steel. So one cool thing that is sort of swept under the rug about a lot of things is back in the day when CPM S30V was being made, there were dozens of professional knife makers who were involved in it. They were sent prototypes and working on it. Tony Marfione was one of them. He isn't just a machinist and a genius when it comes to mechanisms, but he knows his steels too. And he worked with Bowler and Udholm in Europe to cook up their special variant of M390 blade steel. And it's not a huge difference, but it gives you a little bit more of a fine grain structure, a little bit more edge retention. And I'm just excited that we see a special blade steel for Microtech coming out as well. In addition, on the OTF front, my favorite one to have come out so far is the Scarab II. This one's really incredible. It's got these nice 3M traction inserts. These remind me a lot of the inserts we saw on the UDT back in the day. They're grippy, they stay on really well, especially when things get wet, and that action is so good. It's really easy to run, but look at my arm. It just jiggles when this thing goes. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. I better stop doing that. But this knife hits so hard. One of the most dependable double action out the fronts I've ever held. Another thing that's really exciting that came out just a few weeks ago is their zero blade play offerings that are first going to be available on the Luminary they did with Surefire, as well as the ULTR Tech that's been upgraded to feature that same dual fuel action, those same crud cutters, and now zero blade play, which is very difficult to accomplish on an out the front mechanism. But they can do it at Microtech because Tony is that smart. So in my opinion, if you are looking for an out the front knife, Microtech is where you should go, because the people over there at Microtech are so committed to providing the absolute best knife available, and you must have that level of commitment to make a good out the front, because if you don't, it can be a really hard action to run, it can be really jiggly, it can be poorly made, it can sound like a broken trampoline. You need somebody who is very, very akin to what is going on inside this knife to make it go right. And Microtech is the place to get that. Now I will tell you, that comes at a price. Microtech knives can be a little bit spendy, but in my opinion, they are worth the investment. Now Microtech doesn't just do OTFs, they also have a pretty strong automatic game. And these are some of the hardest hitting autos I've ever felt. This one is the Stitch. So Tony Marfione has a great relationship with Borka blades, and this is one of the only Borka blades production models there are. People love this one because it's a very tactical knife. It locks you in really well, it's not gonna slip out of your hand, has a good slash, a good puncture, but it also is a very usable knife. That piercing point does great work with tape or packaging, and if you're cutting against a table, like if you're cutting food or something, this thing almost feels like a chef's knife. Very well done, Microtech and Borka. A lot of fun here, and my goodness, these things thump. And I'll tell you, nothing thumps harder than these ones. It goes boom, like you gotta feel one. In fact, one of the videographers was holding this right before we started filming, and he pressed the button and it jumped out of his hand. So definitely something to be aware of. These are powerful automatics, but this is one of the most common and famous of the Microtech models. This is the Socom. This thing, as its name implies, this is designed for military and tactical operations. Very fun indeed. A nice aluminum handle with those 3M traction inlays we've seen before. Those are something you see out of Microtech quite a bit. And then a nice pocket clip. And this one is a tip down pocket clip. And I know there's some of you out there who are like tip up or nothing. I personally like the tip down here because when you pull the Socom out of your pocket, you grab it, you pull it up, and as you rotate it, your thumb is right on the action. You're right there and ready to open that thing. And in a tactical situation, that speed is really good for you. Now, if you're running a flipper or a thumb stud, then maybe you want your hand the other way, but here, just boom, let's go. Very nicely done, Microtech. And next up, let's talk about some manuals, because Microtech is definitely known for their autos. The tactical world loves Microtech, no thanks to John Wick, but their manuals that have been coming out recently are incredible. So this one is the Stitch manuals. We saw the auto a minute ago, but this one uses their ram lock mechanism, which is similar to the crossbar locks we know and love from other companies. But this one, instead of using a bar that rotates, this is a solid block that just integrates with the blade, and then it rides along the liners as well and allows it to really lock the blade down. Still ambidextrous, still easy to operate, but one of the strongest locks out there. Another important thing to note here on this one is this lock does not use the Omega springs that other crossbar style locks have, where they're embedded in the scale. But if you look on this side, you can see there's this coil spring on a guide rod, and that is what makes the spring work. So you're gonna have a much more dependable spring that resists crud and other buildup. Same thing with the stop pin. So this thing can get dirty and still lock up really dependably and without any trouble at all. It also makes maintenance a breeze. You can literally just take in some compressed air and blow that out. You'll be right back in business. They do a really good job with these. This is the Stitch. However, the original of the ram locks was the MSI. And this one has, we can hardly keep this one in stock. Recently, we've been getting a lot more bigger shipments from Microtech, so if you like this one, you might actually be able to find it at Blade HQ. But these ones, I'll tell you what impresses me about these. That M390MK, USA made, this one has an injection molded GRN handle, that same ram lock, and this thing goes for like 200 bucks, just under. And for $200 USA made, like I'm looking at other brands that are made in the USA, this is right in their wheelhouse, but you are getting full Microtech innovation, full Microtech quality at a much, much more competitive price than most Microtechs are. This one has a reversible deep carry pocket clip, just well done all the way around. Love the MSI. Now my favorite of the ram locks, and the one that's actually mine, and the only knife on this table that I own, is the Amphibian. This is a bit of a throwback. The Amphibian was an old automatic that Microtech did, sort of designed as a underwater and above water tactical knife, but I like it because it's got this nice recurve that isn't so deep, so I can still sharpen that on a whetstone without any trouble. M390 MK, I love this thumb stud. Sometimes thumb studs kind of peel up your finger, but this one is nice and wide, super easy to run, G10 handle, and this one's got the milled titanium clip as well. So a little bit of a premium touch there. These ones go for about $300. I love the Amphibian. And then the last manual we'll talk about is the Socom Manual. And we've seen the Socom Auto, and we'll talk about the Socom Fixed Blade here in a bit, but the Socom Manual, I would say, is the most quintessential of the Microtech manuals. It's been around a long time. It's got a nice sturdy liner lock. And what I love here is it feels like a tactical knife, but if you look at the back here, you can see there's a little place here where the lock bar insert screw can protrude. There's a little place here where it reinforces where the liner goes in. Not only do these places make the knife stronger while also making it nice and light, but it reminds you when you pick this up every single time, whoever made this paid a lot of attention to detail and knows that you plan to use it hard. And I really, really appreciate that in a knife. Sometimes you pick it up and you're like, I don't know. But this one, it reminds you every time this knife wants to go to work. So if you want a knife like that, I'd check out these Socom manuals. And lastly, we'll talk about Microtech's fixed blades. Fixed blades aren't usually called innovative because they've been around since knives have been around, but Microtech has not shied away. They always give it the same treatment of really premium materials, really nice milling. One thing I love is Microtech is masters of machining, and you can see this handle. I kind of wish you could feel it. It has this ever so slight texture as though they use like a fine point mill and they put this really fine texture in there. It grips the hand nicely without having to make it a micarta that'll absorb water. A nice stainless blade steel on this one. It's a great fixed blade. I'd take it camping, I'd put it on a vest. I don't know what you'd do with this, but anything you do a fixed blade with, I would trust this for it. And the last one I brought on is the Bassanelli Feather design that was made by Microtech. So Microtech does a lot of collaborations. In fact, we have that Borka on the table. We've seen others with Terzula, with Strider, with a bunch of other names. And Microtech is always happy to team up with some of the greatest names out there. And this one is a everyday carry self-defense tactical knife through and through in classic Bassanelli fashion, but made in the USA of very premium materials. Now this is just a sampling of what Microtech knives there are. There are so many that we haven't talked about, and there are so many that have been discontinued or that we just haven't seen in a long time. The Halo comes to mind. That was one of Tony's first designs, and it was for Halo jumpers, so that if they ended up tangled in their chute in the water, they could have a knife that was a single action, and they hit it and it launches. It will not be closed by anything, cut yourself out of it, and a lot of those ended up in the hands of Halo jumpers because they needed a knife like that. But that is the story of Microtech. They are always doing something for somebody to make a purpose-built knife, and they're doing it for the love of knives. They're not in it for the money, they're not in it for the fame, it is just because we want to make the best cutting tool possible. Now, when I was at dinner at Tony's house, I asked, what advice would you give to a new knife maker? Because he was known as the kid for the longest time. He would show up to the shows, he would take his knives to people, and he would say, what feedback do you have? And a lot of those old knife makers are not very nice. They would tear his work apart. And instead of crying about it, he would go back to the shop and make it better. And he earned the respect of these people doing it. And I wanted to get his advice. What should a new knife maker do if you want to be the next kid? And he said, the only reason you should be making knives is because you love knives and you want to make them the best they can be. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not a way to just build an Instagram presence so you can call yourself an influencer. But if you love knives and you want to make the best one possible, and you're willing to put in the work to do it, you can do it. So, with those inspiring words of Tony Marfione left, I will tell you, Microtech knives are incredible. They are spendy, and that's why I don't own very many of them, but in time, I hope to own many of them. Now, if you do happen to own many of them, especially the old ones, the world of Microtech collecting is huge. In fact, at Tony's house, he was showing us his original UDT, the first one, and apparently somebody once offered him $100,000 for it. So it's one of the most collectible knife brands too, is all I'm trying to say. But Microtech's a really fun brand, and you can find them all at bladehq.com. And if you get nothing else from this entire video, it is this. Only buy Microtech knives from authorized dealers like bladehq.com, because this brand is so good that it is endlessly mimicked and copied and counterfeited. They have an entire page on their website about counterfeit prevention. If you go to Amazon and you search for a Microtech, there is a very good chance that what you find is a counterfeit. But if you go to bladehq.com, you can rest assured that every single Microtech is a genuine Microtech, and you can trust your life to it. But with that, find all these more on bladehq.com. We'll see you next time.